And founder of the New Democrat Network. He's also a former campaign advisor for President Bill Clinton. Also with us, Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, I want to start with you because this seems like a hardcore sell, a hard-pressed sell. Is that what we're watching, or is this kind of how it gets done?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days ago, Harris, my intel was that they just didn't think this was the vehicle they were going to push. As you saw from that news conference, Republicans are convinced that they are right there on the number of votes they need to pass this, that it'll come down to the same senators probably all over again: Lisa Murkowski, John McCain, Susan Collins, Rand Paul. So they are right there, and they believe, look, they don't believe this is perfect. They don't believe that this does everything they want it to do, but they believe this demonstrates this year that they defang the central part of Obamacare, which are these mandates, repeal some of the taxes, send the money with a haircut back to the governors, and then I think they'll be back at more reforms, including from Tom Price over at HHS, as this moves forward.
You know, Simon, I'm confused. I thought that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, when they came out and did their victory dance on the Dems getting a deal with the president last week, that they were going to do some bipartisan work. What's wrong with this that they won't?
Well, listen, I just want to say the obvious thing here, which is we are breaking 200 years of tradition in the way that legislation's passed in the United States with this legislation. We're not going to have hearings until a few days before the vote. It is against Senate rules to have a vote on a major bill like this without a full CBO score. They're breaking all sorts of rules. Why not allow this to go on for months?
Simon, I'm going to cut in because we have Senator Chuck Schumer giving his reaction after the Democrats have after the Republicans spoke. Let's watch.
First, we heard a lot of talk about the states and governors. Just released was a letter. 10 governors, 5 Democrat, 5 Republican, opposed to TrumpCare 2, the so-called Graham-Cassidy bill, and more in favor of a bipartisan negotiation such as that Senator Alexander and Senator Murray are going forward with. Second, I just heard our Republican colleagues speak. There was a word missing: people, patience, care. All this stuff, Democrat, Republican, governors, Washington. How about how this affects people? Millions will lose coverage. No guarantee of pre-existing condition. And an end to Medicaid as we know it. Tens of millions of people could well lose coverage. People who desperately need essential services would lose it. Our Republican colleagues don't seem to care about how this affects the average American. That's why TrumpCare, the previous TrumpCare bills were so unpopular. That's why this bill is so unpopular. And that's why, despite all their efforts, they're struggling. Because their own senators know that the public dislikes this bill. The latest version of TrumpCare may live under a new name, Graham-Cassidy, but no matter how many ways they try to dress it up, they try to hide it, it's even more dangerous and more reckless than the previous bill that was defeated. Simply put, TrumpCare is a sham. They're crafting it in the dark of night. To say one hearing on one day without a CBO score and only 2 witnesses against the bill, that's a hearing, that's a full airing of the bill? Come on. They're ashamed of this bill. They're afraid to find out what it actually does. And so we get another bill in the dark of night. So the process is awful. Our Republican colleagues, we've heard justice being blind. Our Republican colleagues should be walking around with blindfolds because they don't want to see what's in the bill they're being forced to vote for. With all the cuts to people, with all its unpopularity, with all the basic meanness in this bill. They don't want to go home and tell a mom who learns her daughter or son has cancer that an insurance company can make insurance unaffordable for them. No, they don't want that. They don't want to tell a middle-class family in the suburbs that mom or dad in the nursing home may no longer get coverage. They don't want to tell 23-year-old young man who desperately needs opioid treatment, that it may go away. This isn't simply making the decisions at the states. They make the cuts here in Washington that hurt average people and then tell the states to figure out who to cut. This is not a neutral bill that simply devolves power to the states. It's a bill to end Medicaid as we know it and let the governors do the dirty work. That is why 10 governors from the states of Colorado, Ohio, Alaska, Montana, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Louisiana, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Vermont, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, have said, don't do TrumpCare 2, don't do Graham Cassidy. And just on the substance, according to the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, it'll result in about $700 billion in cuts to health care by 2027. It would cause millions to lose coverage. Millions. It would radically restructure and deeply cut Medicaid. It would bring us back to the days when insurance companies could discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. It would get rid of the consumer protections that gives Americans access to maternity care, substance abuse, prescription drugs. And it would throw the individual markets into chaos, resulting in 15 million people losing coverage. If they let the CBO do its work, if CBO weren't pressured to put out something that's just a few lines, this would all be told by CBO. And how do we know? Because similar bills in the past have been scored by CBO with similar provisions. They're afraid. They are afraid that the public will hate this bill. So they're trying to rush it through in the dark of night. We want, above all, a bill that protects average Americans, not slashes the health care they need. Whether the governor or Washington should try to do that, it's wrong. We want to work in a bipartisan process to make things better. We want the House, the President, Republican leadership to stop pressuring those who want to come up with a bipartisan solution to refrain from doing it. We can make this work in a bipartisan way. And the final thing I'd say is this. We have seen some very, very hopeful sprouts of bipartisanship in the last month. Going back to this TrumpCare 2, Graham Cassidy would shut down that bipartisanship that America yearns for. Senator, I'm going to call on Senator Stabenow because she has to
pull away from this. We've just heard an extended statement from Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, his response to Republicans on the Hill just moments ago, which we brought you live, making their pitch for health care, the Graham Cassidy bill, which they say amends, repeals, does what it needs to do to Obamacare to make it pass. So does it have the votes? Let's bring back our political panel, Simon Rosenberg and Matt Schlapp. Simon, I'm going to start with you. You know, when you hear Chuck Schumer say Republicans are trying to get this bill done in the dark of night, that's a bit rich when you consider what Nancy Pelosi said just a few years ago when she said, well, we're going to pass it to find out what's in it. How is it different?
Harris, that's just incredibly misleading what you just said. The process for passing Obamacare went on for a year. There were dozens of hearings, markups in the Senate, committee hearings that went on. It was an open process that went on for almost a year, right? So if they had followed the same process we did, then the vote on this will take place in about a year from now, after a year of deliberation. This is anti-democratic. This is wrong for the American people. The American people deserve a full hearing that goes on for weeks and allows the Democrats, as we did in the committee process, for Republicans to make changes. The Republicans made many changes in Obamacare during the course of it winding its way through Congress that we accepted and incorporated into the Obamacare bill. We're not having those opportunities. It's not the same, and that's misleading what you just said.
This is not misleading. Harris accurately quoted the former speaker And the fact is, before that bill hit the floor, it was rewritten in the Speaker's office. We've been talking about Obamacare for 7.5 years. We've had 4 national elections on this topic. Everyone knows what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the fact that Obama screwed up our health care system, and individual Americans are paying ridiculous premiums and getting worse coverage. The American people understand what the problem is. It's time for Republicans in Congress to put up their solution to this most serious problem.
Well, one thing is for sure, we have a deadline that Republicans are working up against. It's September 30th to get around the special rules. They want to get this done before they go away, and they need 60. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to step away for breaking news, but I appreciate both of you being with us this afternoon.